Reacting to college football week 2 and playing a surprise game of Guess the Guy that Aaron and Andy do not know about. All that and more when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into a surprise Guess the Guy show. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I am your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr. And tonight we're going to be, talking about what happened in week 2. And I think it's time to react to what's actually happened in college football. We tend to try to give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if you count week 0, give a little time before we go crazy. And we definitely don't want to be those people overreacting for JKS in week 1 and trading away, randomly, let's just say Tet McMillan or something like that for a JKS. We don't want to be those kind of people. So we tend to hold our horses and just chill a little bit. And but I think by week 2, by week 3, we can actually sit here and make some kind of reaction. It is time to say, hey, is there anyone who's maybe not doing what they're supposed to, or not doing what we hoped just yet? So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But I also had a game. We haven't done Guess the Guy in a while. Unfortunately, we'd still need to finish that, but Aaron was out of town. He had some stuff going on, and it didn't work out timeline wise. And then the season started and all that kind of stuff. Well, I came up with a fun little game that we're going to play tonight here in a little bit. But first, let's check in with the boys. Andy, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing well, and I'll just say hypothetically, if you did trade away Tedero McMillan for JKS, hopefully you got some really solid other wide receivers like Jeremy Bernard and Mario Craver in that deal as well, because then it would be an easier pill to swallow. That's for sure. Hypothetically, of course.
Hypothetically, of course. Aaron, how's it going, man?
Loving the hypothetical talk, and we've all had those trades, that's for sure. But that's a fun one. And yes, we do have some reactions, and hopefully, they'll be valid ones for sure. Enough signals thus far for us to maybe get a little bit of a worried, a worried reaction out of us tonight. We'll see.
Absolutely. Before we get into Guess the Guy, was there anything in, obviously week 1 was amazing. We talked about the history making, week 1 and so much changed and everything. Was there anything in week 2 that really, obviously besides what we're going to be talking about tonight, is there anything in week 2 that really piqued your interest or anything like that? Because I will be 100% honest. Beyond watching the Gators lose to USF, I did not watch that much college football this weekend. I was pretty busy, so I let Debbie Beth do her thing. But that was my part, was sitting on the couch with a couple friends watching the Gators lose that game, and I was like, oh, cool, this is a great way to start the season.
I feel like that's actually a good game to bring up. I mean, that's a perfect example of just the craziness that has happened thus far this season. And you could call it a collapse of Florida for sure, right? As a team overall. I'm not going to put it all on like a DJ Legway necessarily. I think USF, they've just shown that they're a really solid team. Like what they did to Boise State, who was really above and beyond, maybe one of the best teams for sure in the G5 last season. Expected to be the same this season, and USF has just come out playing really, really great team football, good quarterback play, etc. So that is a big takeaway. I think Clemson's offense continuing to kind of sputter or struggle, that is another takeaway. It's pretty big in college football. But some of these small teams that these teams have been going up against Georgia, even Clemson, Texas. This last week, it wasn't the most exciting week. Some teams were just kind of beating up on guys, and we don't really know who ultimately is going to be the difference makers quite yet for some of these teams.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing. Like I've got some guys that my interest is peaked, but it's not at a spot yet where I'm comfortable to say like, hey, these are people that we need to be talking about NFL draft like today. There's certainly some people that have stood out, but like Aaron was saying, they're playing a lot of FCS schools, a lot of stepping down in competition from the P5 down to or the P4 down to the lower levels of competition. Let's wait and see how these guys do once they get into their conference schedules before we start making like some grandiose, takes as it pertains to the NFL. But as far as last week in particular, I think it was kind of a down week just because there wasn't like the top 10 matchups that we had in week one.
Right.
But it's college football, so it's still super exciting. But I'm certainly looking forward to next week and this weekend, and also once we get into these conference schedules, it's gonna really bust things open, and we can start really evaluating and figuring out where guys land.
No, absolutely. I definitely agree. I felt that down week. It just didn't seem like there was as much excitement. Part of that was probably because I didn't care anymore once the Gators lost, but it was like, hey, it just didn't seem. We had so much, and maybe we're greedy. We had so much in week one, and week two didn't sound or seem nearly as great. But I was looking through some of the games or the first couple of games for a player, and I started thinking about we used to have, or I've had the Will Levis line for the past few years now, and we really don't talk about it enough. And if you don't know the Will Levis line, if you're a new listener, essentially it's like you don't ever want to be below that line. You don't ever even want to be around that line, because I always said that Will Levis was absolutely the like worst possible. Like spot in Devy bet that you could end up in and still, I guess, technically get drafted in the NFL. But we obviously know who Will Levis is as an NFL player now and everything. Back then, this is more of a college take and saying he's not going to translate well to the NFL. And it gave me an idea. Why don't we play a little game of guess the guy, Will Levis or mystery QB? Let's guess the guy. All right, so I have a couple of game lines here, and you guys can both play. It's going to be kind of, maybe we can turn this into a game that we do more often. We can, come up with a scoreboard and all that. But for tonight, it'll be more like whose line is it anyways? Like I'll just give out points as I see fit. But we're going to play. Is this a Will Levis game line or is this the mystery QB's game line? And then at the end, you guys can guess who the mystery QB is. You can do it as a team or you can do it separately. I don't really care. Like I said, we're giving points for however I see fit here.
I don't know how we're gonna get these right. It's just gonna be a shot in the dark, but this will be interesting.
All right.
That's right.
Game number one. This is a win, by the way. The team won. The player went 13 for 24, a 54.2% completion rate, 202 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 7.38 adjusted yards per attempt. Will Levis or mystery QB?
Mystery QB, I suppose.
All right, I think did we lose Andy or is he being completely still because he's like decided he's not going to play the game. He's just going to sit completely still on our screens. One of these days we're going to get Andy. Yeah, one of these days we're going to get Andy off of dial-up and we'll get him playing the game right and everything. But you guessed mystery QB. That was incorrect. That was Will Levis's line. 13 and 24, 54.2% completion rate in a win. Second game here, another win. 22 of 51, 43.1% completion rate, 337 yards, passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 6.02 adjusted yards per attempt.
6.02.
And we got Andy back. I don't know if you heard that one, Andy, or not.
I heard the first one. Are we on number 2 right now?
Yeah, the first one was Will Levis. Aaron guessed Mr. QB, but it was Will Levis. So he actually lost 3,000 points on that one. But the second one, 22 of 51, 43.1% completion rate, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 6.02 adjusted yards per attempt. Will Levis or Mr. QB?
I think this is mystery QB, and I think I already know who the mystery QB is going to be just because I know who you are.
You might. All right, Aaron, do you have a guess on this one?
I'll go same. Absolutely.
That is the mystery QB. Very good. 43.1% completion rate. All right. Another win. A lot of wins here. In a winning fashion, 18 of 26, 69.2% completion rate, 303 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 14.73 adjusted yards per attempt.
What was the stat line one more time?
18 of 26, 69.2% completion rate, 303 yards, and 4 touchdowns with a 14.73 adjusted yards per attempt.
This feels like an unnaturally good game, and I feel like you're just going to throw Will Levis in here to throw me off the set here. So this is a Will Levis game, even though Will Levis is terrible.
No, I'm going someone else. Different mystery guy.
All right, Aaron is down to negative 8,000 points. Andy gets it, a Will Levis line. Will Levis at some point threw for almost 70% completion rate, 303 yards and 4 touchdowns. And 0 interceptions. Holy crap! Like who could have ever seen that coming? Definitely not me. All right, we got 2 left here. See if Aaron can catch up because he's well behind. Andy has 3 points, by the way. So we have mystery QB or Will Levis. In another winning fashion, 23 of 34, which is 67.6% completion rate, 409 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 9.21 adjusted yards per attempt. Will Levis or mystery QB?
That's a crazy game. It feels like a Will Levis game, honestly, just like with the 2 picks mixed in there randomly. I don't know if he ever threw for 400 yards, though. I'm sure he did at some point, like against some crap school. I'll go Will Levis again. I think this just feels like a Will Levis game.
It does feel like Will Levis, but I got to go contrarian here. I got to go zig when they zag.
Holy crap. Aaron takes the lead with 92 points. Andy has -1. And so that was the mystery QB, not a Will Levis line, although a very weird line, right? 409 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 9.21. I mean, not a terrible game. Not the greatest game either. And then the last game, Will Levis or mystery QB, 26 of 41, 63.4% completion rate, 237 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 5.17 adjusted yards per attempt. Will Levis or mystery QB?
I will take the L if it is a mystery QB because that's a Will Levis game. Like this is what the man is known for. Like they've got a trophy at Penn State and Kentucky with that sort of stat line on it. So this is Will Levis.
I have to agree. Sounds pretty Will Levis-ish.
Unfortunately for Aaron, Andy takes the lead because he went first in that answer. You both got it wrong. It was the mystery QB. Andy wins the game with 1,475,322 points to Aaron's 0. So congratulations,
Beautiful.
Andy.
That was fun.
Now, Aaron, I'm going to give you the first shot. If you get this right, if you guess this player correctly, you automatically win. You get 500 million points, and Andy falls down to 0. So, Aaron, who is the mystery QB?
So it's part of the current college football landscape, correct? Like this is a current
He is
player.
part of the current college landscape, and in fact, that last game we just went over was his week 2 game.
Oh, ooh. One more
63
recap on
point,
the stats.
63.4% completion rate, 237 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 5.17 adjusted yards per attempt.
Cade Klubnik.
I'm so sorry, Aaron. It is not Cade Klubnik. Andy.
I feel like this whole segment was made so you can just take some more shots at Garrett Nussmeier. So it's got to
100%.
be a Garrett Nussmeier.
It's 100% Garrett Nussmeier. Ding,
Yeah.
ding, ding. Andy wins the trophy.
Let's go.
Worst game ever.
I enjoyed it. I don't. Hopefully, the listeners will enjoy it. But I mean, honestly, it was just something that popped into my head. I was like, I'm looking at these lines, and we're seeing Garrett Nussmeier still in Heisman Trophy talks and 101 overall in the NFL talks and like all this other stuff. I'm just like, where's this coming from, guys? Because I mean, obviously, we only listed 3 of his games. He obviously has had better games. He's had worse games. That's why I tried to have a mix of both in there. But I wanted to point out that the most recent game against a very poor opponent, was almost like he's getting worse. And so it's just something that I want to point out to people because I don't think they realize, like, yeah, they're winning. All of these were wins. All of these games were wins that I covered. They're winning games. That's great. That does not make him a good quarterback.
But he had a resounding win, 23-7 against LA Tech, Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They played Louisiana Tech, and he had those numbers. And I mean, I'm not trying to take away too much from one game. Obviously, we look at a lot more than just one game. Every quarterback can have a down game. I get that, but it just doesn't sit right. I mean, honestly, the reason why I even brought it up is because of all the players, and I said, Devy Beth gets kind of messed up in the first couple of weeks of the season, but of all the players that have jumped up and even fallen and stuff, there's not been a single player who's fallen harder in the first 2 weeks in Devy Beth than Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, he has not done a single thing to better his numbers, and in fact, he's worsened his numbers in every single category in the first 2 weeks of the season. And so I just want to make sure that we're on the right path here, where people are understanding that Garrett Nussmeier is actually doing worse this season so far. We'll see if we can turn it around, but yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I mean, you guys, I don't know if you enjoyed that, but hopefully the listeners enjoyed it.
Well, that is interesting to hear that he's dropped because he was already pretty low in your model. And yeah, so we already had some doubts about him. And I think tonight is a great night for us to be able to go over some guys who might have a slight, concern or maybe a significant concern. We'll talk about how significantly we are concerned or worried about these players. But sometimes these early season games, they should be playing a lot better than they maybe have been, and that is reason for concern, especially when there's questionable opposition and competition that these guys are playing, and they're still not doing well.
Andy, how are you feeling after your big win?
Oh, I feel great about the win. But yeah, I mean, Nussmeier's looked terrible. Under 6 yards per attempt, only 2 touchdowns. I get the Clemson game. Like, let's write that one off. Clemson is Clemson. They've got one of the best defenses in the country. But to go out there and, did what he did against Louisiana Tech, who, no disrespect to Louisiana Tech, but this is LSU. Like, you're supposed to be in the playoffs later this year. You should be putting up more points and doing more for your offense than what Garrett Nussmeier's been doing. And there's no excuses because I know we got some flack last week for Nussmeier and, his low ADOT, low yards per attempt. Well, what's the excuse this week? Because that game, it should have been he should have been doing more than what he was essentially. But a win's a win, I guess. But I just don't think that style of play is going to fly in the SEC.
Ooh, I have a good comp.
Oop.
Mason Rudolph for Garrett Nussmeier.
Okay.
Mason
I
Rudolph,
definitely don't hate it.
yeah, he kind of, I mean, he just reminds me of a, good enough size, all those types of things, but just not a mobile guy, right? Not a creative type of player at the quarterback position. Yes, put up some good stats, some counting numbers, all those types of things in college, but yeah, I think that's kind of the trajectory and what I am anticipating future-wise out of a Garrett Nussmeier, for example.
From strictly the model's purposes, for strictly Beth's purposes, I will say that Beth liked Mason Rudolph more than Garrett Nussmeier. I will also add though, I did not at that point because I mean Mason Rudolph's been in the league for what 8 years or something like that, 7 years, whatever the hell it is, a while. In that time, I did not have big time throw rate and intended air yards in Beth at that moment. So that definitely could have skewed things or made it to where they were closer or whatever. But I will say, not to say that Beth ever loved Mason Rudolph, but was definitely higher on him, like thinking he could have become something. And we have seen some flashes out of Mason Rudolph. Is like he seems like one of those like I don't even know if I want to say a high end backup, but just like a decent backup in the NFL to where like you can actually go out and not lose a game with them and things like that. Maybe you'll be able to get the same thing out of Nussmeier. And now we lost Aaron. I don't know what's going on tonight. I'm going to be doing a solo pod here in any minute, but
Hope not. I'm still here. Hopefully.
hopefully. I don't know. Aaron was so mad about losing the big game there that he just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, enough about Garrett Nussmeier. Although it does segue nicely into our segment. Let's dive into Devy. And Aaron is back. Hopefully, looks like we're getting him back here. Yes, he is. All right, so let's dive into Devy. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of these players that we were higher on at the very least, and maybe we're starting to, 2 weeks in, we're starting to have a little cause for concern there with some of these players, and so that's why the Nussmeier transition was perfect because I've had concerns about Nussmeier for the past 4 seasons, but it's taken some time for others to catch up. But Andy, I believe you made us a list. Do you want to go over the entire list, or you just want to start with player number one? And we lost Andy. I'm telling you, this is not a good night for
Legway.
Oh, there
Probably
he is. Okay, he's back.
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah. All right, start over because I did not hear you at all.
Oh my God. Sorry guys. But DJ Lagway was like the main one I wanted to touch on, mainly because of the big loss last week to USF. And I know we talked about USF is probably a better team than what people are letting on, but if you still look at DJ Lagway's numbers for the season, like it's hovering around mediocre. So something that I figured we could at least look into.
I mean, it definitely has not been amazing. I told you, or I mentioned at the beginning of the season, what did we need to see? I think Aaron was gone for that pod, but we said, what do we need to see from these players? And DJ Lagway was one of them. And we said, what do we need to see from DJ Lagway this year? And I said, you need to clean up the interceptions. You have to clean up the interceptions. And if he does that, like I can excuse away everything else. But that 4%. 4 point whatever percent interception, 4.7% interception rate from last year. I'm like, you got to get rid of that. Not to say that like it's all doom and gloom because he threw one pick in this game, but obviously it was a close game. It was a game they should not have lost, and he does go out and throw a pick in this game, and so it's just like that is troubling. Obviously the adjusted yards per attempt aren't there. The bigger plays, are there and everything, but he's still struggling to complete passes like we would like to see. It's a lot more like dinks and dunks and things like that. So I haven't quite seen the step forward that I want to see yet. I don't know if it's all doom and gloom, but losing to an in-state rival is never a good thing.
No, it's certainly not a good thing, but I'm not overly worried based on these two games out of DJ Lagway because his first game was solid enough in a 55-0 win, right? They were not needing to push the ball down the field. He had an 83 percent completion percentage, three touchdowns, no interceptions. He hasn't fumbled the ball this season. He had the one interception last game, but we talked about how difficult of an opponent South Florida just is this year. And the team overall was overmatched, and they don't even have what I consider their most talented wide receiver, or I'm projecting to be their best type of receiver there in Dallas Wilson at Florida. So DJ Legway should have some reinforcements coming his way. Yes, he needs to clean up the game still, or keep that game clean. He needs to be able to push the ball down the field, showcase, not only that he has a great skill set as a rusher when he wants to, but also showcase that arm talent that he has, because he was an absolutely prolific high school producer, very, very dominant player. So I'm not necessarily panicked about DJ Legway. I think it's fair to be able to discuss that, but these two games do not have me worried that much.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with that, and I think Vernell Brown has been a nice surprise, or maybe not surprise, obviously, because he was a very highly recruited wide receiver, but he's been performing well. But if you look at the depth chart beyond that, like you got J. Michael Sturdivant and Eugene Wilson as your second and third options as wide receiver, and those guys just aren't cutting it. Like they're low yards per reception players. Like Eugene Wilson has 12 catches for 59 yards. It's crazy. It's such a his stat line in the first week was insane. It was like negative yards and a touchdown in the first half. But he's got a good running game with Jaden Baugh, who's been performing pretty well. I think it's still a learning curve. Like these are young guys. Lagway is only a sophomore. Yeah, I know he had a lot of a good handful or more starts last season, but it's all a whole new team because he barely played with Eugene Wilson either. So it's just a bit of a learning curve and just getting comfortable with the team around you. For Florida, their team situation. Hopefully, they can get back on the rails here because if they lose many more games, I feel like they're gonna have to fire that coach. But as far as Lagway is concerned, no, I'm not panicking one bit just yet.
So I'm not panicking, and as like the only fan of the team and everything, I guess I'm more disappointed in it than anything else. But at the same time, this is not what I want to see, and it's only 2 weeks in, and like, we can't even truly count week one. So I mean, really, we're almost kind of just looking at the USF game right now. But generally, when I'm looking for a player to get better at being a QB, I'm saying, DJ Lagway already hit all the thresholds I'm looking for: intended air yards, big time throw rate, all that kind of stuff in year one. He just threw way too many picks. He was a gunslinger in like the worst way, and so what I didn't want to see was him to become Bo Nix, and I didn't, that's not what I wanted to see. And unfortunately, that's what we have seen so far. He went from an 8.8% big time throw rate in 2024 to a 3.8% big time throw rate in 2025 so far. Intended air yards of 11.8 last season, intended air yards of 7.5 this season. So we're seeing a lot of dinks and dunks. And the thing is, like, I mean, yeah, you can say Vernell Brown is more of a slot receiver. I don't even know if they've necessarily been using him as that because obviously Eugene Wilson's been out there. Vernell Brown already has 135 receiving yards. Is looking pretty damn good. And not to say that anyone was ever out or against Vernell Brown here, but I'd mentioned I thought if he got his chance, he could easily break that year 1-0 and be a guy, and he's already kind of proving to that he can do that. But you're seeing Eugene Wilson hasn't even hardly done anything yet. He has 12 receptions for 56 yards. He's the same exact player that we always said that he was. So all that to be said, this is not what I wanted to see from DJ Lagway. I am nervous. I will say I'm definitely nervous that he is he's trying to fix the interceptions by being a game manager, and that is not what we want to see from our star QB or whatever. And that's why we lost the game to USF. We're not seeing the big plays. We're not seeing the yardage, the scoring, the things that we need. And that's how you lose a game 16-18.
Yeah, that's very fair. Now, another guy that I think should be mentioned, not necessarily on the list that Andy had come up with, but I think Austin Simmons, and we could even lump in Caden Lee with that because Ole Miss, they've been kind of on the struggle bus, but that chemistry is clearly not there right now with Austin Simmons to Caden Lee. That connection right now is not strong. Austin Simmons, he's been banged up, so I will say that is the silver lining in this is that maybe not all of this is completely his fault of being like a bad player by any means, but just a guy who's he's thrown up too many just hero balls, just lobbing it up there. Somebody's going to catch it. Nope, it's been the other team catching it. So making some really poor decisions. And yes, he's a young guy. Like I think he'll have plenty of time to turn this around. And we could say the same thing about DJ Legway. Like DJ Legway, he might struggle this entire season if the coaching staff and the surrounding players at Florida are just not quite what they need to be at this time. But we have plenty of time to wait and see them develop. They have a whole nother year in college. I think that we're going to have some time here to let Simmons ultimately flourish there at Ole Miss. But yeah, it's been a rough start so far. And then we're looking at Caden Lee, who we expected to be probably stepping up as the number one wide receiver at Ole Miss. He's not even like a top 2-3 option within the offense right now with how they're using him. It is bad. I've always had my concerns, I would say, about Caden Lee's like touchdown upside, but I thought he would still be eating from a volume standpoint, right? He'd still be very much involved. But we're seeing definitely some concern there. I'm curious if you guys have any insight into that and just, how much you guys are buying into the struggles we've seen thus far for Ole Miss in that offense.
So what I'm seeing so far is essentially what DJ Lagway was last season. It's almost exactly like a carbon copy of that. You see the 5.4% big time throw rate from Austin Simmons, which is over the 5% threshold that I look for. 11.5 intended air yards. I just got done talking about how DJ Lagway had 11.8 last season, and then of course he has a 7.27% interception rate right now. I mean, he has 4 interceptions, with through 2 games. Of course, that is going to come down, or at least we would assume that will come down at some point. But it's still a very high interception rate that we have to be worried about. So I do think it's just like a young player who is, coming into his own and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not overly concerned about that kind of stuff. I am concerned about, it is impacting Caden Lee because it looks like he's looking for those big plays. And that's what he's hitting Harrison Wallace III for these 25-yard completions or more, that he's averaging 25 yards a reception. So he's looking for these huge plays, and that's why those intended air yards are up. But he needs to start working the intermediate and things like that. And I think with time we'll get that. We would never expect any other QB to come in and be a polished, version of themselves after 2 weeks. So, of actually starting for the first time. And yeah, like technically he's been in college for what, 3 years or something like that. But as far as I know, he's still only like 19 years old or he's not an old quarterback. He's obviously not an experienced quarterback. So I see that DJ Lagway talent. I'm not necessarily comparing them, but I'm just saying like they're similar types of players and things like that. I see that type of talent. So no, I'm not overly concerned. I still like what I see in the numbers, but just like I said, going in with Lagway, you gotta clean it up at some point. So I guess I'm more concerned for Caden Lee just being completely just gone. I mean, he has three receptions for 21 yards. I get he might not fit exactly what Lee or what Simmons is doing right now, but at some point they have to start working him in. And I remember I was telling Andy before we started recording, like I remember watching an interview with Austin Simmons, and obviously like these guys talk a lot and they make a lot of promises and stuff like that, but the way that he talked about Caden Lee was like Caden Lee was going to have 1,400 yards this year, and so the fact that he has 21 so far makes me think that something drastically has to change. But yes, I am very concerned about Caden Lee right now, as much as I like the player.
Yeah, for Austin Simmons, it's the interceptions, of course. Like four of them in these two games is too many. I think it's probably on a larger scale even than what we saw with Lagway last year. Obviously, we're only at two games right now, so a lot can happen. But with Caden Lee, I'm not in panic mode. I'm not in panic mode with Simmons either. Just based on the yards per attempt, and he's throwing the ball downfield. But I expect both those numbers to come down once, hopefully, he starts integrating Caden Lee and some of these other guys in the offense. Just because you got to use that. You can't just be one dimensional in the passing game. But if you look at the route participation for the top three receivers, you got Wallace, Caden Lee, and Stribling. They're all right around like 45 routes. So it's not like Caden Lee's not out there. He's just not getting targeted from Simmons. So, and that's like John was saying, it's probably a Simmons issue, and maybe that just needs to be looked at and dissected and diagnosed in the film room. And hopefully, they can say like, hey, listen, you threw this terrible interception. These, we were talking during the game last week. He threw two really, really bad interceptions that were nobody was around. But you got Caden Lee on this route who was open. Something it just needs to be coached up, I think, because they are young players. But Lee's out there, and I expect him to have big games this season. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen, because like you were saying, John, Harrison Wallace isn't going to finish the season with 28 yards per reception. It's impossible. Like Ole Miss is not going to win many games running an offense like that.
No, I mean he is a somewhat big player. He always has been, even going back to his Penn State days, but not to that extent. I think this is definitely one of those 2 game flukes. I'll never forget one thing that always kind of brings me back to reality, even if it's a player I love or if it's a player I hate or whatever. Um, Going back to my first true season of after I created Debbie Beth, and I was watching the first 4 weeks of the season, and Eric Ezukanma had like 490 yards receiving through 4 games. I mean, you would have thought he was the greatest receiver anyone had ever seen in the history of the world. And of course, and he skyrocketed up Beth, and I'm like, why isn't anyone talking about Eric Uzakonma and like all this other stuff? And obviously, we know now. I think he finished that year with like 700 receiving yards. It was not a lot, after that. And then obviously we know he's essentially what we would call a failed wide receiver in the NFL. He did make it to the NFL, but he went to Miami, and I do not believe he's ever even caught a ball, or if he has, it's been one or two. So that always kind of brings me back down to earth. Like when I get excited about players, or when I'm feeling nervous about players, is like, I've seen this happen before. I've seen crazy stuff happen in the first few weeks, and sometimes it's more of who they're playing and competition levels and things like that, and other times it's just for whatever reason things just worked out that way for a few games, and then next thing it goes back to normal. So I think we could very well see something like the Eric Ezekama days with Harrison Bailey here, or Harrison Wallace, not Harrison Bailey, Harrison Wallace here, and then obviously Caden Lee could come out of his shell and actually start doing something. But yeah, I'm not definitely not concerned about Simmons. I think the biggest thing for me, is looking at that is if he was completing 40% of his passes or something, I feel like we could say maybe the game's too big for him. But he's sitting at the 60% mark right now. Throwing the ball down the field, pushing the ball down the field, obviously a lot with those interceptions, but still completing 60% gives me hope and belief that he can turn it around and actually clean that stuff up.
Absolutely.
All right, and then the yeah, we got the carousel of co-hosts tonight, so we're hopefully we'll be able to keep these guys on, and I don't know, I guess I'll Venmo them like $50 so they can pay their cable bills or internet bills next time.
Please do. Yeah.
All right, so we talked about Caden Lee, Austin Simmons, and DJ Lagway. But I think there's another wide receiver that people were very high on going into the season that we have not seen too much from. Andy, you want to talk about TJ Moore?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the entire Clemson offense, I think needs to not. I shouldn't say entire because Bryant Wesco's having an excellent season, as we all expected. But I think T.J. Moore for a lot of people was the sophomore on this team that they were expecting to have the big breakout. And then of course Antonio Williams, who got injured in week one, only he's barely played. It's hard to really say should we be panicked about him, but maybe we should because injuries have been quite a substantial part of his career. Um, and is that an issue that's going to follow him into the NFL? Um, but as far as the rest of the team, Cade Klubnik's been down. You got TJ Moore, who through 2 games, despite leading the team in route participation, only has 5 receptions for 56 yards. Excuse me, he is behind Tyler Brown and Bryant Wesco for routes, but that seems to be like where he's planted though as the wide receiver 3 on this team. Um, Whether it be Antonio Williams or I guess in this case Tyler Brown now, who's seems to be fully healthy this year. So to me, like TJ Moore, who was a top 10 wide receiver for most people at the start of the year, I'm I would kind of place myself more on the panic side of things at this point, just because it seems evident to me that Bryant Wesco is the wide receiver 1 moving forward. Not that a team can't carry 2 NFL wide receivers on a team at once, but as it stands right now, it just doesn't seem like T.J. Moore is living up to what we were expecting early on in the season. And part of that might be Cade Klubnik, who his completion percentage is below 60%. We've never been big Cade Klubnik guys. I know he's been talked about as the number 1 draft pick next year. He's been talked about as a Heisman winner. We never really bought into that stuff. So it's hard to say that we're panicked about it because you can't panic about something you were never worried about to begin with. But if you did have a lot of equity in Cade Klubnik and really were buying into this NFL draft type, then I would say yes, you should be panicking because through 2 games, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, the ADOT's under 10, the yards per attempt are below 7. It's all screaming like mediocrity. I know LSU's a tough opponent, but I think who they play last week, like South Carolina State or something. I don't even remember, but it was a better team than that. But in any event, you'd like to see more from Cade Klubnik, especially if you're in like a CFF league. You probably drafted him in like the 1st or 2nd round.
Oh, 100%. And I'm going to basically let Aaron talk about TJ here because I'll throw a
It was
couple of
Troy
my
who they played, by the way. They played Troy last
Troy.
week.
Okay, I'll throw a couple words. Yeah, that's not who you want to be having 1 reception for 1 yard against. I don't think you want to have that. I can say I was lower than most on TJ Moore, but I was definitely not low on TJ Moore. So this isn't trying to victory lap or anything like that. I still liked TJ Moore a lot. I always liked Wesco more. I I obviously, like you said, like Andy said, Klubnik is not a good QB, so this was never like a shock or anything that he wasn't going to, be perfect for them. But from what we saw last year, we thought he could at least be a solid college QB at the very least and get these guys the ball. Aaron, what do you think about the performance so far? Are you completely writing it off, or are you starting to get a little nervous?
Yeah, so I am nervous for the offense as a whole. Definitely nervous for what Cade Klubnik has done thus far, but at the same time, I mean, there's enough continuity there where from last season's roster where I think he'll be able to at least be a functional guy. The running game right now is not very strong, and as they get, for example, Gideon Davidson more involved, maybe Eziumume can step up, give them some reps too. I'm not really into Adam Randall, the wide receiver type of thing. It's like remember when they tried to make Ty Montgomery running back at the NFL
Yeah.
level? It's just I'm not really buying into an effective run game, at least in college, with that type of an approach. So with the converted tall, lanky kind of. I mean, he's not lanky. I guess he's built up that frame. But no, Adam Randall, don't love that running game to help them. Cade Klubnik, yeah, looks bad thus far, but again, small sample size. I think they'll figure it out here. And the thing is that first game against LSU, TJ Moore actually looked just fine. I mean, he had 4 receptions, 55 yards, and that was within a pretty, sad passing or offensive performance. Losing, 10, only scoring 10 points in that entire game for Clemson's offense. So I'm more worried about the offense than TJ Moore as a player. I still think that he's a solid guy. He definitely did not step up against Troy, but it's not like they were, other than Bryant Wesco dominating, they weren't really interested in trying to air it out the entire game either. So from a freshman production standpoint, very, very much a still promising season for TJ Moore last year. Don't want to take away from that with nearly 650 plus yards and 5 touchdowns in the receiving game. I think he's going to be just fine long term, but is just fine going to actually be like a high upside player? I don't know. But we do love Bryant Wesco on this podcast. So I'll say that, TJ Moore obviously becoming more and more that second, third option within the offense. It's less sexy. I did have to move him down in my Devy ranks, but I'm still pretty high on him as a receiver. So I have TJ Moore still within my top 15 overall Devy wide receivers.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said it once. I'll say it again. I do not make changes this early in the offseason to my ranks because Beth just goes crazy in the first couple of weeks, and it's already happened with Moore, and rightfully so. I mean, he had 1 reception for 1 yard this past week against Troy, so obviously he dropped substantially. I mean, once again, this is not my actual ranks. This is just where he is in the actual model today. He dropped down to wide receiver 67 overall. So that obviously I don't assume that's going to stay that way or anything like that. I still like TJ Moore, the player. I'm assuming it's going to go back up at some point. But I was looking at Klubnik's numbers, and what's weird is, last year always felt like a fluke because I mean he was never that player. He was not good at all. And then all of a sudden it was Heisman talk and this and that and everything. And even then it still felt like he's still a college QB. But then people started taking it a little too far. Heisman talk, 101 overall talk, and things like that, like a la Garrett Nussmeier. Unfortunately, people are starved for QB play, and so they do that. But I'm looking at his numbers. His numbers are almost exactly the same this year as they were last year. We're just not getting the big plays. His intended air yards are almost exactly the same. The big time throw rate is only like slightly lower than it was before. Obviously, the PPR points per touch are coming down, but that's because they're not getting these big plays. So, it's almost more of an offense thing. Just like the offense as a whole is not gelling, or they just got lucky last year. Those are like the two things that I can kind of come up with. But I don't really say that it's a TJ Moore problem. I think it's a Cade Klubnik problem or a Clemson problem. And so all that to be said, I'm not overly concerned about TJ Moore. I think you obviously would have to, if you had him in your top 10, I think you do kind of have to get him out of there for now at the very least. It doesn't really make sense to hold on to that much hope. But at the same time, I still believe in the player. I still think he's a talented player and that things will turn around at some point for him.
Yeah, that's a fair call. And from like a panic meter standpoint, I mean, he's still pretty low on there. If we had to go from 0, not worried at all, to 10, extremely worried about him. He's in the 2-3 range for me as far as TJ Moore goes. Versus we go back to a guy like maybe Austin Simmons, it's a little bit higher because we haven't really seen it before. Like we saw TJ Moore very solid freshman season. Austin Simmons, somewhat more of a projection. We liked the talent in theory, right? But we just hadn't really seen it before, and what we're seeing now is not great within what should be a pretty competent offense. So, Simmons, that's more up in that 4, 5, 6 range for panic meter. You have to start getting more worried, in my opinion, with them.
Real quick, should we be worried about Gideon Davidson at all? Because he got so much hype in the offseason, in the fall program, the spring program, all that kind of stuff. And then we just haven't hardly seen him, in like 2 touches this last game, and either 0 touches or not very many in the first game. Anything to be concerned about, or just coaches being stupid and oh, we're gonna turn Adam Randall into a running back.
Yeah, I
I'm
think it's
not
more of a
worried.
coaching thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with Aaron. I'm not worried yet. Like if he finishes season with only under 10 carries, then maybe it becomes an issue. But let's see how the season progresses and how much longer they run the Adam Randall experience before they're like we need to get a guy in there who's actually a seasoned running back.
I will say if Adam Randall ends up being like the stud running back for Clemson this year, I think I'll just be completely out on any kind of recruits going to Clemson at that point. Because I mean, the people got really hyped about Izzy Amume, and then people got really hyped about Gideon Davidson, and through 2 weeks now, so we have to calm down a little bit. But through 2 weeks, it's not looking like those guys are going to see me touching the field too much. So it's kind of weird, but we will see. It's a long season.
Yeah, and Gideon Davidson, what he's had 5 carries so far through the 2 games. They weren't really in a blowout opportunity in either one of those ones. The coach going with the guys he trusts more, who have more experience in college football. It makes total sense. I'm not worried at all. He's a 0 on the panic scale for me. Gideon Davidson, wheels up for the rest of the season. He's already getting snaps. Guess who had 8 touches in his first 2 games in his career at Clemson, who is also a very good running back, and that is Travis Etienne. Right, he was hardly involved in his first couple of games there at Clemson, and I'm not saying like they're the same player or anything like that, but we just know that Dabo, he's not going to throw a guy out there week 1 and just trust him with 100% of the carries as a freshman running back at least. And yeah, we got to have a little bit of patience with Gideon and some of these other freshman running backs out there. It's fun to see in those blowout games like what was it, Bo Jackson for Ohio State really going off last week. That was fun to see, and he might actually carve out a larger share sooner rather than later. But I think the same thing's coming with Gideon. We are not seeing that offense click, and they need to mix it up. So why not put in the talented and juiced up freshmen? So I don't want to overreact too much. I think Ezzy Amume is a little bit more of a swing and a miss. He's been pretty bad or just non-impactful thus far in his career. Gideon, I have a lot more high hopes for, that's for sure.
Now, you guys know me. I'm just a humble podcast host here. I try not to pat myself on the back too often or anything like that. I just kind of go along my day, but I do want to give myself a little bit of credit here because a week before the season, I traded for Travis Etienne with Aaron, and this is not to dunk on Aaron because Aaron is in a different world in that league. He's trying to rebuild. He's trying to compete on the college side. It's a C2C league, so this is not me dunking on Aaron for him giving up Travis Etienne. He had no business having Travis Etienne on his team. This is me saying believe in the talent and believe in the not talent. People were getting really hyped about Tank Bigsby, and that's why this podcast is here, is for you guys to know that Tank Bigsby's never going to take Travis Etienne's job. It's never going to happen. He's never going to take Saquon Barkley's job. He's never going to take any other player's job. He is a backup running back at the very best. And maybe he can have some decent games as a backup or whatever, but he's never going to take someone's job. Basil Tudor is a different story, but I had a belief that Travis Etienne could still be Etienne. It's only 1 week in the NFL, but I'll tell you what, Travis Etienne looked pretty damn good.
Absolutely. And we need to give some running backs some love because we haven't talked about any panic or concern over running backs. And there's a couple guys so far that we could discuss. Deep sleeper Jamarian Wilcox, RIP. Just not going to happen within that coaching staff, right? Within that offense at
That's
Kentucky.
terrible, but you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even him, right? It's probably the coaches. We'll go with that, huh?
I mean, yeah.
Darius Taylor Darius Taylor injured, unfortunately, again for Minnesota. It's the little things with him, just a little nicked up soft tissue injuries, hamstrings,
Yeah.
ankles. That's a specialty. It's not like he has a degenerative condition or anything like
Sure.
that. But it's unfortunate because it happens every season. It seems now it's becoming a trend. One or two times, all right, I'm willing to, kind of brush that off and not be too worried. But when it's every season, he starts to break down with that workload. You have to be
Well,
concerned.
we were trying to push back on it because people really wanted to give him that injury prone label. We were trying to push back on it on the off season. And like sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, and maybe this is one of those times where it's like, hey, he just might be a little injury prone.
Yeah, and guys get that way over their career. I mean, we're seeing that with Christian McCaffrey. Unfortunately, just things crop up,
Yeah.
and he can be, one of the strongest guys, hardest working guys out there, etc. Sometimes that's just the way the human body is, and yeah, we won't get into all of that. I could talk about that for a long time as a physical therapist here. Different compensations that go on, and the psychological mindset, all those types of things that go into injury and rehab. But it is unfortunate for Darius Taylor. I don't know if you guys are, pretty worried over that. Hopefully he'll be back after a game or two, right? I think it's a pulled hammy, so it's not the end of the world, but we know that those things can kind of linger.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, I don't want to say that I'm completely out on him or anything like that, but at the very least, I think you have to lower him down. That being said, how many running backs are you really putting over him though? In the class at the very least, and obviously, I guess we can't guarantee he's coming out or anything like that. So, we can sit here and talk about the 2026 class all we want, but I mean, he could very well stay another year and go, come out next year. So that part's tough, but I mean, I'm just thinking as far as the 26 class, like how many running backs are you really going to move ahead of him as of right now? I mean, obviously, there's still a lot of college football to be played, but I can't think of too many that I'd be like, oh yeah, 100%, he's going ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Nick Singleton, Jeremiah Love, Justice Haynes, if he declares, right? Jonah Coleman for Washington could slide in ahead. Maybe Bryson Washington, Baylor. Start getting some guys creeping up there. Yeah, a couple other dark horses. Maybe Andy has some more names.
No, the first name that popped in my head was Jonah Coleman. I feel like Jonah Coleman, after these 2 weeks, has kind of established himself as one of the top 5 running backs in this class. And if this becomes a lingering issue for Darius Taylor, then yeah, absolutely, Jonah Coleman's going to be ahead of him in my rankings.
No, and I agree. And I'm not even. I guess I probably didn't. I probably didn't put the question out there the way that I was thinking in my head, but I kind of already had those guys up there in that mix. Not say that they were actually ahead of Darius, but I guess I was saying like players beyond that. But of course, I was sitting here thinking in my head of the players that you guys mentioned. Your Jonah Coleman's, your Bryson Washingtons, like Justice Haynes, like those players were already up there in my ranks in the beginning.
You could also, like, if you're going to go further down, you could say maybe Kawan Lacey, if he continues to have the season he's having.
There you go.
Is a guy that
Yeah.
could jump in front of him.
That's what we need to start figuring. I mean, we're 2 weeks in. We don't have to figure it out today, but that's
a
what we need to figure out.
2027 guy, too.
Oh, is he? I thought he was.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was a freshman last season. But
I think you're right.
From his,
Yeah, I think you're
All
right.
right. I'll take your word for it because I'm not a freshman guy.
but I mean, he's a guy who's standing out.
Yeah, that just feels like a name that's been in the college football for a long time for some reason for me.
Yeah. Wouldn't
yeah,
be a Devy Devotional podcast if we didn't mention Mekhi Hughes. Pour one out for the folks who invested there, unfortunately.
Now, to be very, very
yeah.
clear, this is not any of our players that we liked that we're talking about here. We were all very clearly out of Mekhi Hughes, and I mean, is the easiest of the easy victory laps. Andy really wanted a victory lap after week 1. He wanted to go on Twitter and make a post, and I saw a couple posts saying that maybe Mekhi Hughes was benched for disciplinary reasons and things like that in week 1. And the hilarious things is I still saw maybe he was still benched in week 2 for disciplinary reasons, and I'm just like, all right guys, yeah, like let's just we got Jalen Lamar going ahead of him. We got De'Aaron Hill already running with the first team and stuff. We got Jordan Davison, who was huge in week 1. I don't even think he had a touch in week 2. I don't know if he was hurt or if they just didn't need him or what. what, but we're seeing all these players, and then we finally see Mekhi Hughes touching the ball in like the fourth quarter with a 50-point lead and things like that. Yeah, I think we can easily say he might have been, when he was being drafted in like the first round of CFF drafts, he might have been overdrafted slightly.
Yeah. And when he was coming into that game too, he got 9 touches last week, and he did nothing with them. And this is like mop up duty. You're playing against an Oklahoma State team that's beaten down. Yeah, they probably know you're going to run the ball every play because there's, what else are you going to do when you're up by 60 points? But he didn't do anything. Like 9 carries for 30 yards. Didn't do anything in the passing game. Like, if you were expecting even a fraction of what he had at Tulane, you're not going to get that this year. It seems like he's maybe 4th in the pecking order on this running back depth chart at this point in time, which is odd because I feel like he was a highly sought after transfer portal recruit. So I think Oregon probably paid him some money to show up there. But they figured him out right away. Noah Whittington was always, a better running back in my opinion. He's never been a great running back, but he's good. He's good enough. So, and we're seeing that, like, he's actually having a pretty decent season. So if you're talking panic meter on Mekhi Hughes, if you're wondering what the number is for that, it would be a 10. If you have Mekhi Hughes right now, I think you're going to be stuck holding that bag because it's only going to be a few more weeks before he's just straight up droppable.
Yeah, yikes. And even if I'm not going to 10, I mean, it's high. And there's a chance he starts, getting some more some more workload. But for him to be able to, like, separate amongst all the backs that are there, good luck. And I guess there are some other guys. I mean, I don't know that we necessarily have a lot of time here, but we have the, what's his name? Our favorite sleeper out of Illinois.
Hudson
Clement, yeah.
I thought about putting
Clement's
him on
been
the
struggling.
list.
Mhm.
I mean, I will say, like, he missed some time and things, and then the coaches were like, he's making all the right moves, he's doing all that. So, like, I obviously we should be concerned, but, like, I guess I'm giving it a, like, we need more time than, like, even giving it a panic meter. Just if we're 4 weeks in and he's doing what he's doing now, then I'd say, yeah, let's start panicking. But I'd say give me like 2 more games, and then I'll give you an actual answer on Hudson Clement.
Right. Yeah, it's tough when you transfer into a new system. It takes time to actually get the trust, the chemistry going on the field, reps, all those types of things. So that is very fair.
Andy,
Yeah.
did you have any more for us before we get out of here?
No, but I will add to Hudson Clement. I think it's a little bit, maybe not as much of a panic, but a little bit more than baseline just because Hank Beatty's been so good. And I know they don't necessarily play the same position. Hank Beatty's more of a slot receiver. Clement kind of, he's more of a tweener. He can go either way. But Clement has been such a target for Luke Altmaier, and I think they've started to, develop that comfortability that it's going to be hard for Clement to come in there and, carve out a role as like the top option in that offense.
No, that's fair. And Hank, I posted that, or I sent you guys that screenshot of the graph from the Dynasty Workshop that I'm working on. The call it the Devy graphs and things like that. The Devy metrics that I'm working on. Not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. But I sent you guys the wide receivers, and it was the market share. And you got Jordan Tyson. Just actually, I did post it on Twitter. You got Jordan Tyson just all the way up at the top, and it's just unbelievable. Like you playing at that level, like 65% market share, and it's 2 games, but still, like, it's just unbelievable. Like even being anywhere close to that. But here it is, like halfway through the chart. There's Hank Beatty. It's like, damn it, that's supposed to be Hudson Clement, man. So yeah, We will have to see. I'm giving it a wait. It sounds like Andy and Aaron are probably a little more scared, a little more nervous about Hudson, and that's very fair. I did draft him in quite a few leagues, so I will say I'm very invested. Whereas with Mekhi Hughes, I was going to say, I have a 0 on my panic meter because I have no Mekhi Hughes, so I do not care. It's perfect. I do not panic. I do not need to panic. Yeah, but with Hudson Clement, there's definitely some opportunity there that I might have to panic. But obviously, there's a lot of time left with all these guys. I've seen crazier things happen. I don't know if Aaron heard it earlier, but we were talking about Eric as Akunma and his hot start. What was it, 3-4 years ago? And it was just like unreal. It seemed like he was the next big thing, and then obviously he was not the next big thing. So we see this happen a lot. It happens quite often, and I've even seen it happen 3, 4, 5 games into the season, and then nothing. So 1 or 2 games into the season, and then drastic changes from there is not unheard of, or even all that wild to consider. So. We got a lot of football left to talk about, and honestly, we're gonna every week we get more and more into real football, real games. Less FCS, less BS non-conference opponents and things like that, and then we really start getting an answer, and that's when Debbie Beth dials in and goes, "All right, it's time to start updating these ranks and really getting into." Who are going to be these 2026 rookies? Who's really standing out in the 2027 class now that we're sophomores and so on and so forth and that kind of stuff, and who's going to break that year 1-0 mold in the 2028 class, things like that. So we have a lot to talk about still, a lot of fun stuff. Maybe we can come up with another fun game, for next week. I know Aaron absolutely loved that game, tonight's game. So, Aaron, because you loved it so much, why don't you give us some words of wisdom before we get out of here?
All right. Well, tonight was a little bit of negatives, guys who have disappointed thus far, not been impressive, etc. But hopefully going forwards, we'll highlight some standout players and some really exciting performances, guys who are vaulting up their ranks, really impressing us. And we should have another week of games and updated film, data, etc. to go off of. So I'm excited for what's ahead. Stay tuned, and we'll get into some fun things. That's for sure.
I always say week 3 after the real week 3, not week 0, 1, 2, actual 1, 2, 3. Week 3 is when I start feeling confident about feeling good about players. So I think it's perfect timing next week. We talked negatively tonight. Let's go ahead and get into some players that are standing out. Whether it's players that we've always loved or some players that we've recently found out about, things like that. So I think that'll be the goal for next week. We will be back in your ears as soon as possible. Obviously, make sure you're liking, subscribing, doing all that kind of stuff. But I will say we have like a small group of LSU fans that tend to comment on our Garrett Nussmeier videos, and I'm gonna clip them again. So I mean, we're gonna get them again. So let's try and get. I know it's not all hate listens and things like that to the Debbie Devotional. So let's try and get some positive comments on our YouTube channel this week. I'm gonna post the shorts from the clip. I'm gonna obviously post the full video will be there as well. Let's get some likes and some positive comments as well, or at the very least constructive criticism to our Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. Make sure you're there, liking, subscribing, doing all that kind of stuff, and go ahead and give us a comment on some of those shorts. We're getting great views. We just need we need a little more nicety in our lives. So we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.